Peace and Conflict Studies, Juniata College. I know college is busy and with a lot of assignments and classes, and after a long day, you're showing up to this lecture means like proves your commitment and dedication to peace. So I really appreciate your time for being here today. I'm Zia Haq. I'm the director of Bacon Institute. So some of you might know Bacon Institute houses Peace and Conflict Studies program. We have two POE under Bacon Institute, is International Studies and PACS. And we also offer dual POE with communication departments in partnership with the communication and conflict resolution. And also a lot of our students come from different disciplines and they individualize their POE. The interesting fact about Bacon Institute is one of the oldest peace program in the United States. I think the second oldest started in the 1970s. So the mission of the Bacon Institute is to study war as human problems and peace as a human potential. So we provide leadership in education, in development of the field of peace and conflict studies. And also we do research and offer classes in these studies, and Bacon Institute is a kind of hub of activism for social justice, peace building. We are very fortunate to have Dr. Amr Abdalla as our resident scholar for spring 2022. And Amr Abdalla has a long history of working in peace education. He has been to many countries. He graduated from Dutch Nation, PhD, International Conflict Resolution, and he has been in this field for the last 3 decades. So people come to me and ask me a question like, what is peace studies? And what I'm going to do with a degree in peace studies? And this is a kind of boring question. And I also, when I started a peace studies graduate, I never share the story that I'm studying peace studies to my parents. I hide those information because I was scared that I'll be questioned why I choose a POE doesn't sound. When you think about economics and political science, history, everything is like, everybody knows maybe similar text, but the idea of peace is so broad and fluid. You don't know how to define peace. It's a complicated story. If I ask you what is peace, I'll get different answers, right? So Bacon Institute provide scholarship, peace scholarship with new scholars here on campus, and also invite speakers. We partner with different departments. So to respond to some questions, what I'm going to do with peace studies, what skills you provide, we decided to invite Dr. Abdalla to share his journey, his remarkable journey in the field for the last 3 decades, how he's using his skills and impacting community. He has been to 70 countries, still doing a lot of consultancy with the United Nations and UNESCO and many other NGOs, and helping community in the post-conflict peace building. So everybody has a story to share, and here's my little story, Dr. Amr Abdalla. I met Dr. Abdalla in 2009 when I think I was in master's. I took a class with his peace research design, and Amr provided a short training for a day long, so I spent a whole day designing a research problem, and I never failed before. And I helped him with his project as a research assistant, but I never thought at that moment that we'll be meeting here again at Juniata. As a colleague, we'll be working together. So Amr has so many students like me. He trained a lot of folks like me, and he's still doing those things. So we are very proud to have you, Amr, here to share your remarkable journey in peace building. And I hope you'll find the lecture useful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haq, and really I am honored to be here with all of you, and thank you for this wonderful introduction. And as my students, I see several of my students are here, and they know that when I start something, I say, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Well, good. I'm glad. I'm learning. I mean, you should see the first day I was here. And when I said good evening, like, no answer. I said, no, no, no. I'm going to leave. I'm not going to stay here. So I'm so happy to see the reaction. And it is really a great just honor and joy to be here with all of you at Juniata College. And in order to fit with mode, so the jacket is a bit hot, I just take my jacket off. Consider this home for the next few months, and I will wear this a lot, I'm sure. I am so grateful to all of you for giving me the opportunity to stand in front of you here and to share why peace studies and a degree in peace studies can make a difference, not only in your own life, but in the life of many others around you. So my presentation today is about taking you into a journey of what peace studies have done for me, and hopefully what impact they've had on many others, and what are lessons learned for us and for students who are contemplating the possibility of studying in the field of peace and conflict resolution. I come from Egypt, and my first degree in 1977 was in law. I had a degree in law, and I practiced as a prosecutor for about 6 or 7 years. One of my quizzes is, can you guess who I am here? That's from now, I'm 85. Those who know, do not tell them. Any guess? Yes?
On the right side.
This one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good guess, but wrong. I think you took it because I have a bald head now, right? Wait till you see a picture. One of those days before I leave Juniata, I'll show you a picture of how my hair looked like when I was 16 and 17. I had an afro as big as Michael Jackson's afro when he was black. Actually, I was trying to mimic him. That's what it was. So no, I was not born bald. I had hair. So, yes, sir.
Third from the left, on the top.
Yeah.
This one?
Yes.
Yeah, that is me. See, I was skinny, I had hair. And I was a prosecutor. And that's what I was doing for several years. And then from there, by a strike of luck, and I have to say, and I am sure for the young people here, your life will be a series of strikes of luck. It's not necessarily that everything you plan, 1, 2, 3, and how it goes. Yes, you do plan, you make direction, you try to hope to be somewhere, but how things will unfold, the universe decides that. So for me, I was sitting one day in my office with those colleagues, and a couple of them came to me and said, hey, Amr, we are going to American University in Cairo to take a test of English. And if we do well, then we may qualify for a scholarship in the United States. I said, can I go with you? They said, yeah, sure. I happen to speak English very, very well since I was young. Because not only that I wanted my hair to look like Michael Jackson, but I also wanted to listen. I was obsessed with songs when I was a teenager. I'd listen to American songs and try to say, what are they saying? Of course, that was the time of the Beatles, the Partridge Family. Anybody remember that? I mean, those kind of bands of the time. And I listened and I tried to understand what they say. Go ask my teachers, what is this word? What is the meaning? I don't know what this obsession was, but obviously it helped me a lot because eventually my English was super when I was in college and high school. So when I went to this exam at American University, I excelled in it. Before I knew it, in 3 or 4 months, I found myself on an airplane coming to the US to study for 1 year of all the places in the world. And that's just something. Before I go there, I want to say that one of the highlights of what I did as a prosecutor in Egypt was that I worked on the case of the assassination of President Anwar Sadat in 1981. This is President Sadat of Egypt in 81. He was in a military parade when those guys came and attacked and killed him. And those were members of what was called at that time Islamic Jihad, one of the groups that was using violence in the name of Islam. And they are the founding fathers of many groups we have today, such as ISIS, Boko Haram, and so on. They are so inspired by that group of 1980s. So my destiny brought me to that Office of National Security in the 80s to find myself spending 4 or 5 years working with those people to try to find a way how we're going to prosecute them, did they commit those crimes, and so on. That was my story for 5 or 6 years of my life. And it was in the middle of this that I get this chance to find an aeroplane that takes me to George Mason University. And when I go to George Mason University, I discovered that they have a program about peace and conflict studies. They were so proud about it. They advertised everywhere that it was the first graduate program. Of course, you here, you came before that, and maybe a couple of others, Manchester College and so on, primarily at the undergrad level. But for the grad level, George Mason claims until today that they were the pioneer. They were the first. When I went there, it was so interesting for me to know that there is something called conflict studies. It was very new. And for me as a prosecutor, I only understood conflicts from a legal judicial perspective. That what is the application of the law? Did you commit this crime? Did you do this wrong? Did you did something wrong? And here is the ruling according to the law. But working with the terrorists actually had alerted me that there is much more to a phenomenon such as terrorism than simply to deal with it as a legal issue. There are sociological dimensions, psychological dimensions, cultural dimensions, religious, historical, you name it. And if you don't deal with all these, then you will just be putting a band-aid on the deep wound. But the wound keeps coming back. So when I came to George Mason and I found that they have a program, and I remember the advertising was, we're going to look at conflict from historical perspective, sociological perspective, legal perspective. I thought, wow, this is what I want to do. And as a result, I decided that this is what I want to do forever. I finished my scholarship, and people who are familiar with J1 visa and all that stuff, I had to go back home for 2 years, went back, continued to work as a prosecutor for a couple of years, and then I came back to US for good in 1987 to George Mason, finished my master's degree in sociology and conflict studies, and then my PhD in conflict analysis and resolution. And I switched my professional career completely. Instead of being a prosecutor, I no longer went back to do prosecution work or legal work. Instead, in the United States, I started from zero. Started the typical good American story of success or failure, I don't know what yet to judge it. But definitely had to build myself step by step while raising family and working and going to graduate school, the whole gamut. In doing this, I started, I remember, as a young small research assistant, part-time on a grant at George Mason in the sociology department. But I learned so much from that. Eventually, I was promoted to become a full-time director of research at George Mason, and that led eventually, by the time I approached getting my PhD, to start to teach, and then I became a faculty member, and I taught at George Mason University for about 3 or 4 years. And then again, another strike of luck took me to University for Peace. I remember somebody came and talked to me about, oh, there is University for Peace in Costa Rica, and you may be a good fit to go there to teach some course. I said, what is University for Peace? And they said, oh, I mean, they gave me some of the history of it. So I decided to just go check it out. I went there to teach in 2004-03 as a visiting professor. I guess they liked me. And then 2 or 3 months, they kept asking me to come back as visiting professor. And then 2004, they said, would you like to come as our dean and professor? I asked my wife. She said yes. So, talking about conflict resolution, right? So, you have to consult with the partners who are engaged. So she said yes, why not? And we did go to Costa Rica. And before I knew it, we spent there 10 years. 10 years of really applying everything that I have been learning about peace and conflict when I was at George Mason and beyond. But also the learning while at UPeace was amazing. So George Mason was one station in learning about peace and conflict, followed by University for Peace. And then after UPeace in 2014, I found myself going to Ethiopia, to the Institute of Peace and Security Studies with the African Union and Addis Ababa University. And I spent about 2.5 years there. One of the highlights of my work there, actually, is that one of my PhD students, who was in my classroom, and then I was his dissertation advisor, and he graduated with his PhD at the time I was leaving Ethiopia, is the current Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed. I know there's a lot of controversy right now and a lot of challenges in their country. May God help all of them, and I hope that they will find their way to peace. But definitely, I feel proud that one of my students not only became the Prime Minister, he became the Nobel Peace Laureate in 2019. And from there, throughout my work, I traveled so much doing research, doing training, teaching, conferences, you name it. Variety of things I have done in many places. I put arrows by most of the countries that I could remember I have been to. As you can see, in Latin America, North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, you name it, everywhere. Still, China is on the list, and Australia. Then hopefully we'll get the arrow there soon. I cannot tell you how much I learned by traveling and working with people everywhere in the world, especially when you work at the level of conflict and peace building. This is a different story. I'm not going there as a tourist. I'm going there to deal with people who are at the lowest level, usually, and suffering, struggling, or just coming out of a struggle. And I would say that what I learned, whether in the books, in my PhD, in my master's degree, interaction with the students, there was so much to learn, but also it was what I learned by being with people and seeing people. So what I want to do for this presentation is to combine two things. I want to talk about what I learned from this. When I think what you learn in the field of peace and conflict, and this is for all of you who are contemplating this, yes, you're going to read a lot of books, you're going to write papers, you're going to do exams, you name it. But much more than this, you will learn that conflicts are inevitable. You will learn that conflicts will happen no matter where you are. There is nothing called paradise. There is nothing like, oh, finally we have the great workplace that will have no conflicts, or finally the best relationship, or finally the best international relationship. No. Yes, you can be great and you can know how to deal with issues, but conflicts will always happen. And therefore, we need to be prepared. Yesterday, I went to Geisinger, which is like the medical facility here. And when the nurse, I think, asked me, what are you teaching? I said, peace and conflict resolution. It's like, oh, wow. I mean, it's kind of like weird, strange or something. And I said, we are like you. I mean, like doctors. You will never run out of business. There will be always sick people, no matter how much progress you are making. And the same for us. I mean, we will make progress, and I think we are making progress. But there will always be conflict that require that we do something about it. And then you realize that conflicts happen at all levels. When we talk about peace and conflict, we are not only talking about international Ukraine and Russia and the US and NATO. That's one level for sure, very important for our study of peace and conflict. But it is not the only level. We are also talking about organizational conflict. We are talking about community conflict, talking about interpersonal, family. Because the dynamics of conflict, when you study systemically, you realize that there are dynamics that run across all of them, and that they influence how conflicts happen. And by systemically understand and analyze, we may be able to come up with peaceful resolutions or settlements for conflicts, or do peaceful interventions. This is the whole thing that we're trying to do, is to try to find a way to peacefully resolve conflicts, and yes, we believe it is possible, if we know how to dissect and to analyze. And then I would say that 65 years of living, I summed it in the wisdom of 65 years, I summed it in this last line here. No one wakes up in the morning thinking they are the bad person. Think about it. Have you ever woke up one day in a conflict with someone and said, it's a great day to do evil. We don't do that, right? We wake up convinced that we are the good people. And we are convinced that the other one is the bad person. And let's be dramatic about it. Imagine I woke up one day, I put an explosive belt around my waist, and I went into a space full of civilians, blow up myself, and killed as many as I could. Did I wake up thinking I was a bad guy? The shock is, I am convinced I'm doing the right thing. And when you understand that, okay, no matter how much the conflict is severe, I need to understand where somebody's coming from. Not to say, oh, you are right, oh my God, I didn't know, go blow up some more people. No, it is the total opposite. It goes back to my experience as a prosecutor, realizing that the legal limits and the approaches and judicial approaches and security approaches are limited. If I want to change the phenomena of terrorism, I need to get to the heart and mind of people. And I will not get there if I keep dismissing as crazy. I will get there if I can understand how are they thinking, where did this come from, and then I need to undo it. That will be transformation of conflict. That will be the peace building that we are talking about. But on all levels of conflict, family conflict, community conflict, workplace conflict, consistently, everyone believes I am a good person, and you have to make the other one bad. You have to, when I say you have to, from a psychological point of view, in order for me to inflict harm on somebody, whether I am a person or a nation or whatever it is, I must develop a sense that you are the bad person. When you are the bad person, I give myself more legitimacy to inflict harm on you. If I see you as legitimate, it will be very difficult for me to inflict harm on you. And of course, when I inflict harm on you, hit you, beat you, bomb you, whatever it is, I convince myself that I am doing this in self-defense, or it is legitimate that I am using this kind of force. You never call it violence when you're doing it. But when the other side does it to you, it is called violence. This dynamic is where conflicts get out of control. And we need to learn to get more people and nations and communities to know how to say, can I get into the other side's shoes and understand how they are thinking about the situation? And then find a way that they also understand where I come from. If we can do this in more conflicts, then I think we're going to have more peaceful solutions. Because the more you humanize the other, the more it becomes difficult for you to inflict harm on them. And actually, the opposite of that is that if you go and inflict harm on people, violence, and you are not convinced that you are doing the right thing, you can lose your mind, you can commit suicide, you can go crazy. You inflict harm on yourself when you do that. And that's why it is psychologically very important for you to justify for yourself that the other side is a bad person. Our task in the field of peace and conflict is to undo that. Undo that, not to encourage people to do more violence, or to say you are justified, no, but to how to correct it from a deep level. This is a lot of what you will learn. A lot of what the field of peace and conflict is about is around those four elements that I mentioned to you. So, who did this education impact the most? Me. Definitely. And in which ways? If I compare myself before I started the study of peace and conflict, definitely I learned empathy. I learned how to understand other people, how to give benefit of the doubt. How when I think of conflict, I don't just jump and say, oh, of course, here is the bad guy, here is the good guy. Enough of this dichotomy of bad and good, but to try to understand deeper what are the issues that people have in different conflicts. And I cannot tell you how much it's helped me in my life and in my professional career and everything to have this kind of empathy. That wouldn't have been possible if I did not study in the field of peace and conflict resolution. Second, definitely, better peace of mind and heart, dealing even with some of the deep issues that all of us have in our childhood and things of this nature. Knowing how to live peacefully with people, to let go, you become the beneficiary. And the more people can become better people and know how to deal with their own issues, especially the heart and mind issues, I think we can have better chances. Again, conflicts will not go away, but we'll know how to deal with them more effectively and more peacefully. Third, definitely more success in resolving conflicts. Whether, again, in my professional work, and especially when I worked at UPeace, I was in the position of vice rector. I can identify with the leaders here of the community and what you deal with when you are running a university or college of this nature. The stress, the ongoing non-stop issues and conflicts coming your way from the students, from the staff, from the faculty, from the board, you name it. Everyone, you feel like they are doing nothing other than to come to you with more problems. I remember when I was the vice rector at UPeace, I used to say my ideal weekend was when I didn't hear anyone's voice. I just had a quiet weekend, not talk to anybody. That was my ideal weekend, because I had enough for the whole week of dealing with conflicts. It was a training ground. And I think with the learning about peace and conflict, you find yourself compelled, actually, not to react, because you have to live up to the expectation. If you're going to say, I am a professor of peace and conflict studies, and then I'm yelling at people when I'm in conflict, then you lose your credibility. So actually, it becomes a lot of control on how you behave in conflict. And then, before you know it, it becomes how you deal with conflict, and then people see this as, wow, I should really learn something from how you are working on conflicts. And then, openness to learning more. And I'll share more stories, because the more I traveled, the more I saw people in distress, in conflict, and in peace, the more it shook me as a human being. And that's what I'd like to dedicate the big part of this presentation. And then, contagiousness. I cannot tell you how many times I heard students at UPeace and other places I worked in, at the IPSS, and I hope it will happen here in Juniata as well, that they say that the way you are trying to teach about peace and conflict is contagious. It is helping people to really change at a deep level. I say this is the biggest reward I feel I keep getting from studying peace and conflict, is to feel that you are affecting people in such a positive way. By the way, I do have a website, inpeaceamr.com, and there's a reason why it's called InPeaceAmr. For the last 20 years or so, I always sign off on my emails and everything, in peace, Amr. So when I decided to have a website, I thought that is my brand. Nobody does that. So I called it InPeaceAmr. If you go there, you're going to find at one section some of the reviews of my students and comments, especially when I left UPeace. And I think it will give you an idea about that impact that I'm talking about and touching people at a very core level. And that's not me, by the way. I'm not the only one. I would say I was affected so much by professors that I studied with at George Mason University. And I know that there are many of my colleagues that are having this very same impact on people. It is not us. It is the field of the study of peace and conflict that has this ability of transforming us and transforming other people as well. Until today, I just have so much respect and appreciation and admiration to 3 or 4 of my professors at George Mason. And maybe I should on record mention them. And one of them came here in the accreditation process about 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, Professor Rich Rubenstein, Professor Kevin Avro, Professor Chris Mitchell, Professor Michel LeBaron. I mean, those people really touched me at a deep level, and I'm happy to be carrying the baton from them to next generation. Now, I said that a lot of stories I dealt with in my work. And my apology to my students in my classes that they probably heard some of those stories, but there is a large number of people here that have not. And those stories were very touching, and I will take a few minutes just to telling you every story and where it came from and so on. The first story, the goat and the hunger, it's from Rwanda. Rwanda, we all know, it went through a terrible genocide and civil war in 1994. Finally, the war stops. And then there are all this effort from the world community to try to provide support and peace building programs. So 4 years after, 19 or maybe 5, 6 years after, I go there, an organization very famous called Oxfam. Probably some of you heard the name Oxfam before. They do humanitarian work, they do development work, peace building work, and so on. They came up with a very creative program. They said that because of the war and what happened, communities are totally disintegrated, especially the rural areas and the villages. People are so demoralized, scared. Many men have been killed, people displaced, and those who come back now, they don't have the ability to recultivate their land or to reproduce, and things are just stagnant and people are suffering at a deep level. So they wanted to bring back the energy into the communities. So they thought that what we'll do is, we know that the problem is the Hutu doesn't want to talk to the Tutsi and so on. So they said, of course, all of you want to rebuild your life and want to have food to eat and everything. And that will not happen without cultivating your land. So to cultivate your land, here is what we propose to you, is that each group of 4 or 5 families who have land close to each other need to write a proposal to Oxfam, say, what do you need to be able to improve your ability to cultivate your land again? And you write the proposal together, all of you, so that's forcing them to work together. And if we approve it and give you whatever you want, the condition is you have to come for a conflict resolution training so that you learn how to manage the money we give you or whatever we give you to work, and also to prevent the recurrence of violence based on ethnicity and so on. Okay, for somebody desperate, I'll do it. So people started to write proposals and submit. When we went to evaluate, I mean, it looks people were happy and they thought the program is going well. And we asked people, like, so what did you ask Oxfam to give you? I mean, we had in our expectation that they asked it for example, a water pump or something to improve irrigation or something like that. But pretty much almost everybody said, we wanted a goat. Goat, the animal. And myself and my couple of colleagues, we just like, what? Goat? Why is that important for them? So before I tell you why it was important, those who know the answer, please don't give. But if you want to guess, give a good guess. Why do you think the goat was important for that community? You want to say? Anyone?
Milk. Milk the goat?
Oh, milk. Good guess, but wrong.
Meat.
Meat. Better guess, but wrong.
Simple.
Huh?
Simple.
Simple. Wrong guard. It's simple. I don't know. Anyone?
Maybe it encourage those people to cultivate their land.
What do you mean?
So they don't have to like resolve their conflict? No, like they can eat the meat and
Whatever you say, wrong.
I was saying something else.
Say something else.
Like keeping goat might encourage them to cultivate their lands for keeping the goat alive.
Ah, good guess. Wrong. All right, last one.
Eating the grass or clearing the brush.
Okay, half of the answer. Half of the answer. The goat will eat the grass, right? And that's it?
Fertilizer.
Oh, fertilizer. And the goat, excuse my English, will poop. And the poop is very important because this is a fertilizer that will make the quality and the productivity of the land much better without the goat. Also, the goat size is not as big as a cow or a big animal, so the ratio of cutting and eating grass versus how much fertilizer the goat produces is perfect for that. Did we, with PhD, know that? We had no clue. My answers and my guesses were just like yours. I'm not trying to pretend that, oh, I knew it when I went. No, I had no clue. I was just like all of you. And here you can start to see what you learn when you are in the field working with people on issues of peace and conflict. Even a goat and why it is important for the livelihood of people in time of distress, we had no idea. No book prepared us for that. No theory, no framework prepared us for that. It is being in touch with people and to learn from them. That wasn't the whole story. When we went there, we learned that in Rwanda, there are actually, in addition to the Hutu Tutsi, which are one of them large majority, about 70, 80%, the other one about 20% or something. But there is another group, minority, about 3%, and they are called the Batwa. The Batwa are very poor, very simple people, and over time, structural violence and cultural violence have pressured them to the bottom of the society. Almost like the caste system in the Indian subcontinent and the untouchables. Those are the untouchables of Rwanda. No one wants to work with them. The stereotype is they are dirty, they are lazy, they are stupid, they are dangerous. So stay away from them and push them away, don't go near them. And they cannot own land like everyone else, nothing. So when Oxfam learned about it, they said, how can we help you? They said, well, you cannot apply your model to us because according to your model, you assume that we have land and the land is shared with somebody from the other ethnic group and so on. But we don't own land, number one. Number two, nobody want to work with us. So the model doesn't apply. So Oxfam said, okay, we need to come up with something that works for you. They said, listen, that we are not able to do anything. The only thing we can do probably will be if you give us some money to buy some vegetables and fruits, and then we go in the market and sit like any other respectable citizen and sell fruits and vegetables in the market, over time people will start to see us as productive, and that will start to improve our conditions and the image and so on. Sounded great to Oxfam. Oxfam said, fine, we'll give you the money. They got the money, went to the big market like to buy a big amount of vegetables and fruits. On the way going to the market to sell it, they ate all the vegetables and the fruits. They ate all the vegetables and the fruits. When I heard that, I thought, I got to see those people. This is just really beyond my imagination. They finally got their chance in life to improve their conditions. And instead of going to the market, they eat everything. They really lived up to the expectation and the stereotype about them. So I went to meet them, and they looked like what you see here. I can tell you, level of poverty I have never seen. I've seen a lot of poverty all over the world. But the poverty I have seen with the Hutus, with the Batwas, was unbelievable. So I sat with about 6, 7 of them, including a man who looked like this guy. And I started to do my question interview or focus group, whatever you want to call it. And I have a translator. And I said, so you are Batwa? Oh, yes, we are Batwa. And they explained their ethnic background. Okay. And you got the money from Oxfam? Yes, we did. And you went and got some fruits and vegetables? Yes, we did. And you were going to the market? Yes, we were. And on the way you ate it? Yes, we did. I said, what do you mean, yes, we did? I mean, you had your chance in life. And they looked confused, didn't know how to answer me, until this man that looks like this guy, pretty much, or even more older, I think much older. He looked me right in my eyes. I still remember this until 20 plus years after. I remember him looking me right in my eyes when I said that, what were you thinking? And he looked me in my eyes and he said 2 words. He said, hunger bites. Hunger bites. Until now, I get the shivers every time I hear this. I remember this. Because I think this man taught me a lesson in 2 words. He pretty much was asking me, what do you know about hunger? What do you know about starvation? Have you seen loved ones die in front of your eyes because of hunger? Have you been sick chronically because of hunger? And then finally, somebody giving you some vegetables and fruits and you have not eaten for 2, 3 months. Finally, somebody giving you some money to buy fruits and vegetables. And they expect you to follow the logical framework that you're going to go and walk 2 miles until you get to the market and then wait to sell the vegetables and fruits for the whole day and then calculate your profit and loss. And after that, see if you have any money left to go use to buy food. No, we were too hungry for this entire model to apply to us. As a result, of course, in our report of evaluation, we told them that you're doing great work. However, you need to be attentive to the basic needs of people. And this is how the research that is informed by peace and conflict theories and concepts, we can help you here. because we realize those people are dealing with a frustration of basic need at a very deep level. The model of Oxfam, as great as it is not applicable to those people. They need something else. They need almost humanitarian assistance first. And then you can give them some models of this nature to help them to advance their life. And so that was just, again, one of those stories that I saw in my experience that I couldn't get from books. No way. But it sure shaped who I am. When I say empathy, it is from stories like this that I feel like I gained more empathy than I would have ever expected. More stories?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Another story. It's about the concept of violence and non-violence. Again, my apology to my students who heard those stories before. When I was at UPeace, we had students coming from 50, 60 countries in the beginning of the year. And there are about 150 students. Some of them come from physics background, social science, you name it, whatever it is. And when they come to study, we of course have to give them some foundation in peace and conflict studies before they go into their respective master's degree program. So I am the one responsible to give them this peace and conflict introduction or foundation. And the way we set it up is in the morning, I give a lecture to everybody for about an hour. And then after the lecture, we put them in small seminars of 20 people or so. And in the seminar, the idea is to reflect and to do some interactive activities and things of that nature to reflect what was discussed in the lecture. So that's an example of one group. I remember it was in the end of the year 2013. So those are the students from UPeace at the end of the academic year. So a seminar looked like this, pretty much, students of that age. One day, the topic of discussion was nonviolence and strategic nonviolence. Now, you can imagine somebody coming to study at UPeace. I mean, this person is already sold on the idea of nonviolence. So when we are talking in the seminar, and I guess the question was, give examples of models of nonviolence that you're familiar with. So some of them give examples from their communities of people who use the methods of nonviolence to address conflict. Some of them talked about Gandhi, some talked about Martin Luther King, and the discussion was just flowing as expected. Like every year when I do it, that's how it goes. That's one of the easy sessions, because everybody is on the same page. Near the end, a young woman, European, maybe about 23, 24 at the time, raised her hand, and she said, I really appreciate everything you said about nonviolence, and I agree, of course, with everything you said. At the same time, I want to tell you that when I was 14 years old, I was sexually assaulted by 2 men. In retrospect, I wish I used violence to stop this from happening to me. And she started to weep. Can you hear the silence in the room? I cannot tell you how many times I share that story all over the world, and every time I share it, people stop breathing in the room. You hear nothing. And I think it's because it shocks many of us at a level of what? I mean, the experience of this young woman, how do I reconcile it with my values of nonviolence? Of course, all of us want to promote nonviolence. All of us want to think of how to peacefully resolve conflict. But when this young woman saying, when I was 14, I was sexually assaulted, I wish I used violence to stop it from happening to me. Do I say, oh, you're wrong? Who dares to say that? How do we reconcile such a complex concept with the experience of this young woman? And for me, that's big of the part of the power of studying peace and conflict, is to appreciate that those notions and values that we respect so much and we promote are not as straightforward. Things can be very difficult. The gray area is huge. And as a matter of fact, I always tell my students, you come to study peace and conflict, you come with a lot of questions. You're expecting answers. But guess what? We really don't measure our success by how many answers we give you, but actually we measure our success by how many more questions we make you walk away with. In other words, we want to develop your critical thinking. We want to develop how you can take a phenomena or a concept like non-violence and reconcile it with the story of this young woman. And come out with something that is meaningful and useful for yourself and for your communities. Again, the stories, the things I faced in my life after a peace degree, I am so grateful for. And including what I get even from a classroom from a young 23 European woman. One more story? Or this one's too heavy, I know. Okay, another story is from Bangladesh. And I went to do research on the madrasa system of Bangladesh. You know, madrasa is a religious education institutions that are prevalent in many countries in the Muslim world, including in South Asia especially. And Bangladesh has its share of many of those madrasas. Some of those madrasas teach only religious stuff. Some of them, they mix religious with the national curriculum. So I went to this madrasa in Bangladesh that teaches both. And one of the madrasas we went to in the area of Chittagong was, again, they call them Aliya madrasa, the one that teaches both curricula. And also, it was all women, from the top principal to the youngest student. Everyone was a girl or a woman, and they were proud. They were the only school in Bangladesh like this. And they had about 800 students, and the principal, teachers, and so on. And this is kind of how they look. As you can see, very conservative. Those are images of the teachers, how they look like. And those are the girls in the madrasa. Almost all of them are dressed like this. So I sat with the principal and 3-4 teachers. All of them dressed in this way. Totally covered. Cannot see anything. And we're sitting in the principal's room and talking about, and I'm doing my work. I was doing this work on behalf of the State Department of the United States. So they asked us to go and do this research, the purposes, to determine whether the US government should support madrasas as much as they support the regular schools in Bangladesh. That was the main question. And of course, that is 2004, shortly after 2001, September 11. So there is a lot of concern and fear that madrasas are really a place to breed terrorism and violence and all this. So they wanted to make sure, is this really the story or not? So our research was to go into all those madrasas, try to figure out. So I go to this madrasa, and I sit with the principal and the teachers, and we ask them about the madrasa and how they're doing and what are the issues they have. And then, of course, one question is, if we are to support you, what kind of support do you need? What do you need to make this madrasa better for the girls? That was the question. So again, consistent with my asking you to guess. Anyone want to give me, and if you know it, do not answer. Anyone want to guess? What was the first thing that those girls and teachers, the teachers, said that they wanted? The teachers said what? And look at them and try to guess. Anyone?
Goats.
Huh? Say again.
Goats.
Go. Good guess.
But wrong.
How about wrong? Yeah. Yes?
Education.
Education. Wrong. Huh? Anyone else?
Open the blinds,
What's that?
open the closed blinds.
Oh, open the blinds so they can see better? Wrong girl. Huh?
Dollar from the Zoom crowd, we have internet connection.
We have internet connections?
That's from the Zoom crowd.
Oh boy. Okay, I don't know what I can do about this.
That's what they're saying they needed. They needed access to the internet.
Ah, you're not talking about internet here.
No.
All right, Jim. Wow, how did you know that?
I didn't. Someone
Wrong. Oh, it's a guess. Oh, came from. Oh, thank you. Wrong.
from the Zoom crowd.
Wrong.
That's
Wrong. Whoever said it, wrong. All right. Okay, you want to know what they asked the first thing they wanted? Get ready for this. Basketball court. Yeah, can you imagine the shock? Like, what? Yes, he said the girls have energy and we don't know how to get this energy out and we don't have enough facilities. We think we need a basketball court for the girls. So fine, what else? Musical instruments. That was the second thing. I mean, I was blown away. And again, let's take it back to my study of peace and conflict. And don't make assumptions about people. Yes, they are so conservative. But they were very educated, by the way. Those teachers and the principal had master's degrees. But it was their choice or whatever it is, or culture that they have to cover the way they are covered. But they are well educated, they really care for their school madrasa. And as such, they understood that that's what those girls need in that madrasa. It was just really, again, for me actually, when I wrote my report, I have to say that it was so confusing to the State Department. Yes, I highlighted some of the problems that exist in those madrasas, no question about it. But I also said there are promising examples. And talking about impact of our work, this research probably had the greatest impact that I have seen. Because what happened after I wrote the report, it reached the State Department. I still remember getting a phone call from someone I never heard their name before. Said, my name is Dolo, I'm from the State Department, and we need to meet with you to have about the report that you wrote. Okay? So I went there, and in Washington, D.C., and I sat with 6, 7, obviously, top people in the State Department. I remember the way they introduced themselves. My name is Dada, I am the director of East Africa. I am the director of, South Asia. I mean, they are really the big shots, the ones who can sign checks, when you put it this way. And they said, okay, in 15, 20 minutes, give us in a nutshell what you found. So I gave them, my main findings, including a story like this and so on. They had one direct question to me. They said that, are you saying that we should support madrasas like we support the regular schools? I said some madrasas, yes, are worthy of support, but you have to be careful which ones you are selecting. I cannot tell you how happy I was that maybe 2, 3 months after that, I heard from one madrasa in Bangladesh that the culture center of the Embassy of the United States offered 40 scholarships to 20 boys and 20 girls to study English in the culture center of the embassy. Furthermore, they started to bring teachers of madrasas on those 3-week tours that they do in the US in different colleges and schools, and they started to bring teachers of madrasa to do that. And then even later I heard that they donated a van to one of the madrasas to facilitate sending the children back and forth. When you realize that your research can make such a difference, you can actually provide support in areas that people did not expect that support can come, and you change people's mind and heart in the process, and you feel that, yeah, you are in the right place, for sure. And there is just one more, but it's really about a food servant. You remember those guys?
Yeah.
From the beginning that I worked with in 1981, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86. Those guys. Those are the ones who killed Anwar Sadat. Those are the ones who wanted to overthrow the government. Those are the likes of ISIS today and Al-Qaeda. As a matter of fact, this is the one who killed Anwar Sadat himself. He was executed. This is the current leader of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, and he was one of the people that we worked with. And this guy was the leader of, say, southern Egypt. His name is Nagih Ibrahim. And he was like one of the big dangerous ones, and he served 25 years in prison for the crimes he committed in the 80s. So he spent 25 years of his life. And he's a doctor, he's a physician. And while he was in the prison, he got 2 more degrees, degree in law and degree in Islamic studies. So he's very well educated. But very dangerous and very convinced that what he was doing was the right thing. Until things changed in the late 1990s, and actually that dangerous guy himself, Nagih Ibrahim, and many of his colleagues started to rethink their ideology that pushed them to use violence and to commit terrorism. And they declared that we were wrong. And they actually came up with amazing books. In my opinion, the best books that are changing the doctrine of violence in the Islamic context came from those people. They developed those books. And of course, the government, when they saw that, helped them to develop those books. They developed books like this book, the title in Arabic is Mubadarat Waqf al-Unf, meaning the initiative to stop violence. And that's coming from the same terrorists who were still in prison at that time serving their time. The other one is about the inappropriateness of becoming extreme in your religious views. they actually started to transform the entire thinking about that lead to violent extremism. That was like in the late 1990s, early 2000. I remember around 2010, I heard about that. I was stunned because, of course, in my work with him as prosecutor, I knew those guys were so dangerous. The only place they belong is in the prison. To see that some of them repented like this and wrote books of this nature, of course, I kept checking to make sure, are they just doing this like to get away with something, or they are sincere? I found no, they were actually sincere, to the point that actually the government had them go around all the prisons in Egypt to de-radicalize the young generations of jihadists. Imagine, they actually, according to some estimates, they changed the heart and mind of 20,000 young jihadists. They even started to send them to other countries. They went to Indonesia, they went to Libya, and other countries to also do the same thing. Because they're so credible. When you think about it, those are the former terrorists, the ones who, on record, killed Anwar Sadat and did terrible things. When they come to you, if you were a young jihadist contemplating to be like them, and they tell you, listen, we were wrong, please don't go that path, and here is the evidence from the Islamic sources. It is very convincing. When I heard that, and now I'm a professor of peace and conflict, or UPs, whatever, I thought, my goodness, I want to connect with those people. And the connection happened actually when I was in Ethiopia. At one point, I had a project on interfaith dialogue on violent extremism. And we brought youth from Africa and Europe to work on issues of how to address violent extremism using interfaith dialogue and religious discourses. So I thought one good idea would be, let me bring this guy, Naga Ibrahim, because by then he got out of prison after 25 years. He became a very famous TV and media personality, always speaking about peace in the name of Islam and rejecting violence. He totally transformed. So I thought, imagine to bring to those young people someone who was once a jihadist, served 25 years of his life in prison, and have him come to speak about the wrong that he's done. We also brought a Swedish white supremacist, also a repentant one, who also came to talk about his experience when he was a white supremacist and how he has changed. We brought, and this is my picture with Naga Ibrahim in the African Union. The two small pictures is when I had hair, and that's him when he was young behind prison bars. And this is a picture of us in 2017. This is a group of young people from Africa and Europe that came to this project, and I put the arrows on myself and Naga Ibrahim, and this is the former white supremacist from Sweden, and in a sweet way he brought his son with him to that conference. It was really heartwarming to see the transformation, to see that my work in peace and conflict resolution has brought me to a point that I can actually connect with someone who acknowledged their wrong, acknowledged their contribution to violence and their willingness to stop it and to change it for themselves and for others. And for me, a former prosecutor, and for him, a former convict of terrorism, are coming hand in hand now. We continue to stay in touch, we continue to work on projects together to advance peace and to address issues of violence in the name of Islam. And I continue to connect with this group. I'm actually doing a strategic planning for them right now on how to move this project to the next level. It is funded by the German GIZ, which is like the equivalent of USAID in Germany. And now I'm here at Juniata College, the Baker Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies. I have to say I couldn't ask for being in a better place at this point of my career, as evident from standing here, allowing me to share stories of this nature to let you know how much peace education and studying peace and conflict has helped me as a human being, has helped me to help so many others. And I hope by coming back here, it is really very symbolic. This place, as Dr. Haq said, is one of the first programs of peace and conflict in the world. So I'm coming to the cradle, actually, of peace and conflict studies. And I hope that together we will continue to keep the spark of peace shining. Thank you. We have time?
Yes,
I don't know how long that's for. Oh, we can have a... Yes, sir.
So I have a question. I've been a student in Dr. Shung's class, and he's a great history professor and convinced me to be a history major. So you've talked about people who focus on peace and conflict studies. So as a history major, would peace and conflict studies courses help me in my career as a historian or as a physicist or in some other associated field?
Absolutely. I would say, of course, I mean, whether it is history or physics, all of those pieces are related to peace and conflict. I don't think that there is one discipline that I have seen that is as multidisciplinary as the field of peace and conflict. We benefit from people coming from history, from sociology, from psychology. As a matter of fact, the connection of those together is critical, without which you cannot really understand what's happening in a conflict. Being yourself, for example, somebody coming from physics or from natural science field, I believe that yes, I mean actually the benefit is mutual. I can tell you something, that among my best graduates are people who came from natural science and computer science and IT background, or engineers, and they decided to come and study peace and conflict for whatever happening in their life. They are among the best trainers and teachers I have seen. And I have a feeling it's because their education that is systemic, logical, following a specific method of research, when they take this and apply it to how they do peace and conflict, actually it creates an amazing mix. So in this way, I think it's very beneficial. The other way around is that, as I mentioned, that for us, I believe the biggest success of teaching about peace and conflict is to transform individuals from within. And I believe all of us need it, whether I am a scientist or I am a historian or I am doing anything else. Very good, thank you. Other comments, other questions? Yes?
Your career has spanned the pre-internet era, and now the information revolution,
Yes.
the internet. How has that revolution affected the growth of peace studies or peace education or your transformation?
Wow, excellent. Thank you so much. I would say that actually the effect was also two ways. On one hand, sadly, it opened venues for violent people to use it. And we have seen that the way ISIS and other groups continue to use social media and other forms of technology is scary, because they are reaching to audiences that otherwise they wouldn't be able to reach to. That's on that side. But from our side, of course, this has been very beneficial, because it is, for example, when COVID hit us 2 years ago, imagine before COVID, by the way, I used to travel almost on average once or twice a month, somewhere in the world, doing a training, doing a teaching, whatever it is I'm doing. COVID hit, and suddenly, remember the first few months, no fly, don't go, blah, blah, blah. So it was a shock to the system, including, that, of course, colleges and universities that were not prepared to do this kind of distance learning. But what happened is, because of COVID, we learned how to adjust and how to develop materials that were suitable for use on Zoom and the likes. As a result, and I still remember, for example, one organization I worked with in Washington, D.C., they typically had a 3-week institute every summer for the last 20 years. And they bring women. It's actually focused on human rights and conflict resolution for women. And they bring about 25 to 30 women every year from different places to study for 3 weeks in Washington. You imagine the hassle and the logistics that go with that, to house them, to feed them, and so on. Comes COVID, and they still wanted to do the training. So we decided we would try to do it online. Of course, it was cheaper. However, we got 60 women signing up, not 50, not 20 or 25. And that's because it became more accessible to people all over the world. And we developed the proper methodology, pedagogies that seem to resonate well. Luckily, in the field of peace and conflict, as a matter of fact, our teaching cannot be lecture-based. And there is a good reason for that. it is that in peace and conflict, everyone already is an expert. Everyone already is an expert. Has any of us never been in conflict? Impossible, of course. Did we sometimes succeed in resolving conflict? Yes. Did we fail? Yes. Well, all of these are rich experiences. Our job in the classroom and in other settings is to get people to share such experiences, whether through role plays, storytelling, and other small groups, whatever it is. But to sit and just to repeat what's in the books, no, that's not what we do. So actually, we learned, I mean, thanks to Zoom, breakout sections. And I've been learning how to do role plays even in Zoom and get people to do the activities. I mean, we really did a good job. So thanks to technology, it kept us alive in the last couple of years. And in the process, it made us realize that, you know what, we can continue to do this. Yes, I'm happy to go back to face-to-face, happy to see people without masks, I hope. But why should I lose now this advantage of reaching students? The other day I did a training workshop 4 days in Malaysia while I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. Imagine, 3 hours, and young people coming every night. Actually, they were so dedicated, they're coming 8 to 11 p.m. their time to the workshop because it was 8 to 11 a.m. my time. And they were there. I wouldn't have, I mean, if I were to go there, imagine the cost and COVID would be a prohibition and so on. So the reach is much more effective because of media, and we are learning more how to use it. And I think that there will be more virtual reality and artificial intelligence will keep growing. I think the way we see things today will be archaic compared to how it will be 10 years from now. I mean, and you seem to be also kind of close to my generation. You remember 10 years ago, things were very different from what it is now. Why do we think that's not going to be even more drastic? I think it will be more drastic. So, and that being drastic will help us. We will have more methods of teaching online in an effective way. Yes, sir.
So this is not a Jim question. This is from Zoom. It says, this was a truly insightful presentation. Thank you. I love the stories. Can you say more about what precipitated the change with the former terrorists from the 1980s? What did they acknowledge that went wrong concerning their religious beliefs?
Excellent. Of course, that was really one of the key questions I was interested in. And they concluded, actually, here's the logic to it, very interesting. They said that their entire journey of using violence in the name of Islam was to promote Islam. I mean, that is the idea, is that the more we are fighting the enemies and the infidels, then we are increasing the chances that Islam would prevail and Islam becomes the dominant religion in the world. The more they've been doing this and failing, and they are seeing the damage that's happening to them, happening to their families, happening to so many people around them, let alone the ones they kill and destroy their lives. At one point there was like this realization, wait a minute, if our objective was to raise the word of Islam, we are not doing that. So it seems that our method is wrong. The method of violence doesn't seem to get us to achieve what we thought we wanted to achieve. And that was the breakthrough. From there, they started to look back at the doctrines, and then they started to realize that there are other ways of looking at the method. And violence is not the only way to do things, and it's not the right time. And even from a pragmatic point of view, they felt that we are exhausting ourselves, exhausting the government, everybody, and getting nowhere. Maybe we need to think of another approach. So it was a mix of that realization that we are not achieving our goal with the pragmatism of we're losing anyway. What are we gaining by doing this? And that made them go in the direction of revisiting the doctrine in order to develop what they believe to be the proper doctrine. Yes?
I just want to follow up on
Okay,
that.
so 1, 2. Yeah, now 1, 2, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just to piggyback on that, So you said you were working with Ibrahim, that person, Can you describe the type of work you did? I know you work as a prosecutor and as a conflict person, And was he resistant to the work you were doing?
Okay, so so what is the question? I'm sorry, your mask is...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So what sort of work did you actually do with him? Because you said you worked with him, and was he resistant to your efforts?
Oh, okay. This is the one, Nagih Ibrahim, the one who transformed himself,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I have to say that I have two observations about him. Number one, myself and other people who met him in that event and after that, because I met him in Egypt as well. Because first we met in Ethiopia in that workshop, and then we met later in Egypt. He is one of the most transformed people I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
And actually, you can see the purity and the remorse for a lot of what happened. He shared with us some prison stories that were unbelievable. Not about terrorists, but about even just regular criminals who came their way. And what happened to them, and how he helped people to really change, and how he helped people to actually go back to life and do good things. It was amazing to hear this. So that's on one level. So yes, and the work we did together was in that program where we are trying to help young people to know how to develop proper tools to use the discourse of religion and faith to address violent extremism in their communities. So that's on that level, he was very useful and actually really a great human being. And when I put him in comparison to where he was 25 years before, or 30 now, or maybe 40 almost, it's unbelievable the change that he made. However, I found that that was interesting also, that his 25 years of prison, I was busy doing my master's and PhD here and getting the best education you can get and learning new skills of presentation and talking and listening to questions and answers. So I was developing all those skills for 25, 30 years. He was in prison for that same time. So I found that the challenge was, when you ask him a question, I don't think he knew how to answer properly. It was, yeah, you say, so like that good question that you asked about, what do you think really triggered, or that came from the Zoom. I struggled to get to understand from him. Every time people ask him a question, he found that he just goes right and left and right. You feel like his mind is all over the place. So it is difficult to just pin him down. I thought that the best thing I need to do with him is to give him training on how to actually present and how to listen to question and answer. I think he lost that ability and skill by being in prison for quarter a century. But otherwise, I have so much respect for him. I see what he writes in the newspapers and the media all the time. I am hoping to find ways to continue to work with him. Thank you. Yes.
Me, right?
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for the presentation and all the awesome stories. That was really inspiring. My question is also related to the transformed man Ibrahim.
Nagih Ibrahim.
And I wonder if he shared what made him believe that violence was a good idea in the first place.
Okay. I don't know if we got into that. We were more interested in the second part, which is how you moved away. Because we are interested in the peaceful approach. But I cannot tell you that I had any discussion of this nature because I already knew from my investigations the review of their books and their literature. So I know exactly where they can come to that conclusion. And that's what I'm doing in the class. Actually, that's exactly in my class that I'm doing here about violent extremism and radicalization. Today we started to go into the journey of understanding the history of Islam, leading to how some people may end up thinking this is the right way to deal with the challenges. And then from there we talk about how to undo this, of course. But mainly, I mean, not from talking to him directly recently, but from my knowledge of the issues, it's a complex story that brings in it culture, history, interpretations of religion, with a strong sense of grievance and sense of injustice inflicted on what they consider to Islam as a religion, which they love so much. And when they feel that this is under threat and insulted to that level, there is a sense of duty, believe it or not, sense of responsibility that we have to fight to preserve the dignity of Islam that is tarnished. And within that, it is easy to pull somebody into believing that this is the right thing to do. Okay? So can I take 1, 2, 3?
Yeah. So you talked a lot about your experiences through peace education and your time at UPeace and how that kind of led you through your career path. Can you talk a little bit maybe about career paths outside of peace education?
Oh, okay, excellent. So yes, of course, one career you can do with peace degree is to be a teacher, professor, and so on, right? But I will tell you, most of the graduates I know, whether from UPeace or from IPSS in Ethiopia, and I understand also of Juniata graduates, they are not necessarily doing education. No, they are actually, many of them are doing work on the ground. Some of them working in NGOs. UN is full of graduates of peace programs that I am familiar with, in UNHCR, in UNESCO, and in many other places. They also work sometimes in governments, in different settings. NGOs, of course, full of them. I think that is maybe the most popular place for many graduates of peace studies, is that they are working in NGOs. So I would say actually the majority don't go the path of education and becoming a teacher. I would say that's only maybe 5–10%, if I'm not mistaken. But the vast majority, they end up doing the work in the NGOs and governments and international organizations. Now, what kind of work they are doing, it varies. Sometimes it is humanitarian assistance. Sometimes developing programs on conflict resolution to do training to communities. Women empowerment, gender issues, those are big topics that human rights, of course, monitoring and human rights recording and so on. That's another big area. And I am hoping that there will be something we do between Juniata and other places that have graduates of the field of peace and conflict to know where are they now. And hopefully we can have some of them do short videos about the work they are doing. Yeah, so don't worry, not all of them are like me. Luckily, they are doing better things, I think so. Okay, number 2, yes?
Okay, so my question is how you deal with those emotions when you study peace and conflict, especially the sad, sharp, and intense emotions. I ask this question is because I'm a highly sensitive person who always emphasizes people more than normal level and more than myself. But I don't think those feelings are negative thoughts because they affect peace and conflict. I just hard to release from these feelings, but I try my best to be objective. I don't want to be controlled by the emotions.
Excellent. No, that's why I said that when you study peace and conflict, I mean, it's not enough to think about it as international relations and political science. If you keep at that level, you will never come to deal with that very deep point you're talking about. This is where we need psychology to come into the picture. I need to understand the human being and the emotions and the feelings and the perceptions and the attitudes, and how do they develop, especially during conflict time, and often in a negative way, and often causing problems. And then what comes from that is, how can we help more people to undo this? How can we help more people to be able to see those emotions and feelings and how they are affecting you? And then how can you bring it under control so you can effectively deal with the conflict for the betterment of yourself and the others you're dealing with? Again, I don't have like a direct answer. I mean, because your question is, well, how do you? But I am giving you the direction where this is going. And I hope that you will find a way to continue to study in the field of peace and conflict, where you can talk to your professors. I want more focus on psychology. I want to understand the psychological dynamics, emotions, feelings, and how they develop in conflict, and then how they affect my behavior, and how can I deal with this. I have to say, this is my favorite area in the field of peace and conflict. So, yeah, I mean, I hope you continue with it. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, 1, you had your hand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you are 2, right, 3. Okay.
All right, so you're going to be glad that only one of these 2 came through. So I have a question from someone named Charlene, who you may be familiar with, who's going to share part of the story about Nagra's time in prison. But you have another question, to zip back up, from Karen, Tula's mom, who I think you know as well.
Yeah.
And she says, what role can peace studies play in larger international conflicts when the parties involved seem disinterested at best and it's not possible to work at the individual level?
Excellent. So you have larger entities, nation states, and they are acting like we don't care, right? Or what's in it for us? My approach, by the way, this is a reflection of power asymmetry, or the fact that you are in a conflict situation, you have not much to lose. So why should I bother? I mean, and that's real. I mean, many conflicts are stuck in this dimension. I believe that to get somebody not interested and they feel like I'm not losing anything by not engaging, to try to convince them from a moral perspective, come and talk to the other side, it doesn't work actually. What you need to do, and I know that's a very pragmatic approach and real political approach, you need to entangle their interests. You need to find a way to make them realize or to change the structures to the point that their interest becomes entangled with the interest of the others, to the point that they need to come to the table, that's one, or to show them that by entangling the interests and working together, you're going to benefit more. I found that in reality, especially when I worked in Darfur in the last couple of years and assessing peace building programs, it is amazing to see that people who hated each other, killed each other for the last 20, 30 years, when UN environment came and helped them to develop programs to address climate change and the change of natural resources, they developed models that entangled the interest of those people who otherwise would have killed each other for some water by developing projects that made it actually, if we cooperate, we're all going to get more water. So they actually, not only now they're getting more water and stop fighting, the relationships started to improve over time. And to the point that those communities started to flourish actually. So I would say that my response to this one is, you need to that's why conflict assessment and conflict analysis is critical. Because when I analyze a conflict, I can identify where are parties, other parties, that for example can influence the stronger one. Where can I find a way to bring their interest to be connected to the interest of other people, to the point that they find that it is actually a loss for me not to engage in peaceful negotiations. Okay. And what was my wife asking?
She just going to share a story about Nagat Abraham's story in prison. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very good. Okay. And number two, yes.
What was your response to the European girl?
I'm sorry. The mask is not helping.
What was your response to the European girl who faced the sexual abuse?
Oh, what was my response to her? Oh boy. I mean, I think we all, of course.
I want to ask this question because at some point our parents want us to be enrolled for some self-defense classes, and at the other end we are reading peace conflict thing. So balancing those things.
You have to balance it. That's the thing. Yes, you need the self-defense. It's very possible you meet somebody who is going to be dangerous to you. You need to know how to defend yourself. It doesn't mean that you are negating everything about peace and non-violence. But I think peace and non-violence, it's not about self-defense, something is wrong with that picture. I mean, because I cannot expect angels to be walking around. And so I think you need to complement the two. I think the girl, when she said the stuff, of course, the amount of support she got from everyone was unbelievable. And until now, I'm in very good relationship with her, and she stays in touch with me as a mentor, as a professor. And she's doing great, by the way. I want to good. There was number 3, yes?
Talking a little bit of the genocide in Rwanda and Burundi, and I was wondering, how would you justify the fact that some major nations, such as France, stood by while those slaughters were being committed?
Okay. Yes, of course, the silence of the international community was a shame, definitely. And I really don't know the details politically of what happened, why France stayed on the side. But it may have something to do, again, with the dynamics of the problem with international relations is it is so ugly, and sometimes actually the self-interest drive people beyond the level of morality that you expect at the community and family and personal level. And my understanding from the little I read about the role of France or the non-role of France is it was probably in their interest, as they thought at that time, that the Hutus will come to power and that they will benefit from this in one way or the other. And that's what made them stay silent. I think also to be fair to many of them in the international committee, probably they didn't really read the warning signs effectively. And nobody understood that it would become this severe. Although the history lessons should have alerted us, this will get out of control. But sadly, they did not react quickly enough. And I think until today, the international community is feeling guilty that they did not move fast in what happened in Rwanda. And that's why actually there was a lot of support to Rwanda, and Burundi not as much for some reason. But Rwanda got a lot of support after the genocide. And you know, actually that Rwanda right now, in terms of development rates, are doing very well. But I am concerned that they are not dealing with the underlying issues between Hutus and Tutsis. And it may look on the surface, everything is fine. But when I talk to some of my friends who supposedly identify as Hutus, which is very difficult in Rwanda for people to tell you I'm Hutu or Tutsi, but you can feel that there is grievance that is not being addressed. I saw that, for example, when we would accept students at UPs. And I found a couple of times students from Rwanda would write and feel very upset they were not admitted and say, you're only admitting Tutsis. Isn't it enough of this? Why aren't we getting the same chances like the others? So that made me realize that apparently there is still issues of access to resources that Hutus are feeling. Yet, in terms of development and where the country is, it's really impressive what they have achieved. But I really don't have much. I am happy to go read carefully about France and come and discuss with me later, definitely. Thank you. Okay, was there any other hands? Okay, is it 9 o'clock? Can I go home? 2 minutes, okay. All right, well, with this, I thank you so much for being here. I appreciate this great show for such an elite evening. And I'm so proud, so honored to be here with the Juniata community. And I turn it to my boss.